Okay, so summary of Chapter 2. I did the Chapter 1 summary in Word, and I'm trying this one in PowerPoint, so you can let me know which one you like best. But now we're talking about corporate image and brand management. So how does the corporate image affect the consumers and the company itself? So we talk about both the tangible and the intangible. Sorry about that. The tangible and intangible components of the brand. The tangible components are things like the product itself and the stores and the advertising messages and the employees. And then you've got intangible components such as policies and culture and media reports, and all these are all part of the brand itself. The role that the brand plays to consumers, the brand does things like instill confidence, helps them reinforce their decision, gives them assurance to try new products if it's a trusted brand. To the company, a strong brand can mean it's easier to introduce new products, it's easier to increase the price, you have more power within the channel with your distributors and retailers. It can also make it easier to attract new employees and obtain financing and all those kinds of things. So a strong brand is really important to the company. The first step is to identify what kind of brand you want to have. You want to look at the current image and the current company, and again, a SWOT analysis here is very helpful. But what you really want to make sure you do at this stage is talk to consumers. You want to talk to your customers, and you want to talk to people who are not your customers and find out why they're not your customers. What do people think of when they hear this brand? Use the information that you learn there to then create a brand image. And you want an integrated message here. And we talked about this in Chapter 1, integrating all the components of the marketing message. But every element here needs to communicate the image that you've decided on here with your brand. Sometimes it's necessary to rejuvenate a brand. Maybe you're trying to attract new customers. Maybe you're trying to reinforce the image to your old customers. But the point is here to actually rejuvenate a brand, it's going to require a lot more than just changing the advertising message. It's going to be actually altering the whole marketing mix and sometimes the corporate culture and all that. But to rejuvenate a brand, you're going to help your old customers rediscover the brand. You're also going to try to contemporize it to reach new customers. Make it more contemporary, make it new, but you want to stay true to the old brand here. You're going to need to emphasize the overall value here. And this is a way to reach both old customers and new customers. This is to emphasize the overall value. And you also want to try to build a sense of community. That can instill a lot of brand loyalty, and that's going to be helpful. Sometimes you have to completely change the brand image. And this can be very, very difficult to change the corporate image or the brand image. It's not always possible. Again, it's not just changing the advertising message, but the whole marketing mix is involved with this one. And they gave a couple examples in your book about companies who successfully just changed the brand image completely, like Target and Maxwell House would be some good examples of that one. Alright, so we've established a corporate image here. What are the different types of corporate names? And we have 4 different types of names. We have the overt names, which really just, it tells what the company does. So American Airlines would be a good example of that. You can tell right from that company name what type of business that is. You've also got implied names. The whole name itself doesn't describe it, but there are recognizable words or parts. FedEx, for example, is short for Federal Express, and Express would kind of imply the delivery. Or IBM is short for International Business Machines, which again implies what they do there. Sometimes you have conceptual names, which just try to kind of capture the essence of what they do, like Google or Krispy Kreme. You know, Krispy Kreme doesn't say anything about donuts, but it does sort of have the concept there, captures the essence of what they do. You also have iconoclastic names, which are really just unique and memorable. Monster.com, for example, is one. It doesn't say anything about what that company does, but it's unique and it's memorable and it's well known that way. Figure 2.7 on page 33 of your book has an interesting little thing about the origin of some corporate names. So those are, I thought, kind of interesting. Once we've established a corporate name, we need a logo, right? So an effective logo needs to be recognizable, so people don't mix it up with something else, and so it's very distinct and easily recognized. It needs to be familiar in order to be effective. It also needs to elicit a shared meaning among consumers, which means when we see that, we're pretty much all thinking the same thing. They talk in this section about stimulus codability. Do we all receive the same message when we see that image, that stimulus in there? So something, a logo, for example, that's recognizable, familiar, and elicits a shared meaning. McDonald's, the golden arches, for example. Apple, you know, you see the little apple, and it's very recognizable, it's very familiar. When we think Apple, we probably all think cutting-edge technology, kind of expensive, very trendy. You know, we sort of all think the same thing, most of us, when we see that in there. But we also want it to evoke a positive feeling. So recognizable isn't good if we all, or the shared meaning isn't good if that shared meaning is negative. So we want to make sure it evokes positive feelings in there. For instance, look at how young kids recognize the golden arches. Even before they can read, they see that golden arches and they know that means McDonald's, and they have very positive feelings about that. So that's a very effective logo. Next we want to talk about what types of different brands we have. And there's a figure on page 34 of your book, figure 2.9, that actually has a lot of examples of these. There are family brands where we have a whole group of related products under one name, like Campbell's Soup, and then they have a couple different types of Campbell's Soup, but they're all under one family there. You also see brand extension. This is when you have an established brand and then you use it to sell a completely different product under the same name, like when Nike moved from shoes to clothes. They established the Nike brand and then used that the strength of the brand to go into something new that they hadn't sold before. Also, there are flanker brands, and Procter & Gamble uses this a lot. Look at how many different brands of laundry detergent they have under one. It's all under Procter & Gamble, but they each have their own brand name. Hallmark has a whole bunch of different brands of cards now. Like, they started with just Hallmark, and then they had the shoebox, and now they have a bunch of other ones. So those are flanker brands. There's also co-branding, which is any combination of two different brands. You can have co-branding by ingredient co-branding, which means one brand is a component in another, is an ingredient in another, like Intel processors and Dell computers. You can have cooperative brands where two different brands team up to offer one product. I don't know, you could have Casey Masterpiece barbecue sauce in Lay's potato chips, barbecue potato chips. That would be a type of cooperative co-branding. You also, you also have complementary, where one product is not part of another, but you kind of market them together. And the example they gave in your book was Velveeta and Rotel, and using those together. So even though they're not the same brand, the one recommends using the other one. So that would be complementary branding. And then you also have private branding or store branding, which is actually our next slide, I think. Well, before we talk about private brands, let's talk about brands in general, how we build them, and how we develop them, how we build them, and how we sustain them. So to develop a brand, let me erase that. To develop a brand, we have to find out why consumers buy our products and why they come back and rebuy it, or maybe if they buy it and they don't come back and rebuy it, why that is. So this is similar to developing a corporate image, and so the same thing. You need to talk to the consumers and find out. Then you need to actually build the brand, and to build a strong brand, there's a whole section in the book there. You're going to have to invest money in it. It's going to cost money. And it's going to take some time too to build a really strong brand, but you have to be willing to put the money into it. You're going to have to create awareness, so reaching out in a lot of different ways. You need it to be something that is unique. You have to find what's that one thing that people think of when they think of what's the one thing that's different about you than your competitors, or that your consumers perceive as a difference. You need to build trust. Consistency in what you offer is going to help build trust, knowing that they stand behind your product. You want to deliver a whole experience, not just the product. So Apple is really good at this. Harley Davidson is good at this. Target is good at this. So it's not just the product, it's the whole experience, the whole augmented product that consumers get with this. You need to offer value. And I want to emphasize that offering value is not always making it cheaper. Sometimes it's keeping the price the same and adding more features that customers value. So as long as customers feel that what they're getting in terms of benefits exceeds what they're paying, then there's a value there. You want to, in order to build your brand, you want to use social media. You want to use mobile devices and this is a great way to reach consumers and get out there and get to them in a different way. The other thing that's really important here is to act responsibly. If you do all this stuff to build a brand, and then consumers, or the public, finds out that you were irresponsible with pollution, or how you treat your employees, or anything like that, then you just would undo all the work that you had done to build up this brand in there. So make sure that you act responsibly. If they feel that find out you're cheating somewhere else or acting unethically, that'll ruin the brand right there, no matter what you've done. Once you've built a strong brand, you have to sustain it, because there's always going to be competition in there. And what we really want to do, the key to sustaining the brand, is to build brand loyalty. If you can build brand loyalty, you have almost guaranteed a profit there. The stronger the loyalty you can get, the more profit you can have. Brand loyalty is apparently mostly determined by emotion and value that they think you're getting. And there's a figure on page 39 that has some really good examples of really brands that have a lot of loyal customers. You're trying to fend off brand parity. Brand parity is when consumers see no difference between the two brands. They're almost the same, they're equal, and so I'm just going to go with whichever one is on sale this week or whichever one's cheaper, so I don't have any loyalty to the brand. The opposite of brand parity is brand equity, and that's where there is a difference and consumers know a difference. What's unique about this brand? That's what equity is. And it doesn't, sometimes it's the features, but sometimes it's the consistency or the quality or the performance. And so that's what makes people loyalty. When I see like Craftsman tools, is it's not necessarily the uniqueness of the product, but that their consistency. People know that's quality, it's guaranteed for a lifetime, and all that kind of thing. So that's very important there to build brand equity, and that's how you get the customer loyalty, the brand loyalty here. Okay, let's talk about private brands a little bit here. Private brands or store label, you know, that used to be the generic brand. It used to be thought of as cheap and inferior quality, but that's not necessarily the case anymore. So one of the big things you're seeing here is improved quality and value in the private label brands. Because of that, what you're seeing, well, kind of in conjunction with that, you're seeing an increase in loyalty to the retail outlet. So I don't go to this store because they carry the brand I want. I go to this store and then I buy whatever brands they happen to carry. So people are less and less going out of their way to find a certain brand, more and more staying loyal to the retail target. For example, you know, I'll always go to Target, and so I wouldn't go out of my way to find a certain brand, but if they have that brand at Target, then I'll get it. So I'm I think a perfect example of that, whereas I'll go to Target, and so my choices are limited to what Target has decided to carry. And that's a pretty significant change, and that really affects the manufacturers as well. Private label brands are used more and more now to differentiate the retailer. And so people really identify the retailer by those private label brands. Or I see that private label and I know that's Kohl's or that's Target or whatever. You see an increase in advertising on private label brands. They didn't used to advertise these at all, and now they will advertise not the retailer, but the brand, the private label brand that those retailers carry. You also see an increase in the quality of the packaging and the displays of these. And the displays. So when you see it in the store, it's not always obvious that it is a private label brand. You know, unless you know that a lot of them you would think they were regular manufacturer brands. You know, it used to be they had the cheapest packaging and it was obvious that that was the generic brand. But now they're marketed just like, I mean, Penny's, for example, in clothes has a lot of private label brands, and they're sold the exact same way that the manufacturer brands are. So there's less of a difference between the private label, and they can be very, very profitable for the retailers, and they're becoming a bigger threat to manufacturer brands. So you see manufacturer brands stepping up the game and increasing their advertising to compete with the private label brands. Okay, let's talk about packaging and labels. So packaging. Packaging is one last chance to make an impression on the consumer. They said in your book 69% of purchase decisions are made at the store, not in advance. So, you know, almost 70% of people are still undecided when they get to the store. So here's your chance to make that. But you only have about 3 seconds to catch their attention on average. So it has to be, there's a lot for that packaging to accomplish. What is the packaging? What is the purpose of the packaging? And there's a lot of different things here. First, its goal is to protect the product. It's to make the shipping and handling easier for the consumer and for the retailers and manufacturers. To make it easier to sit on the shelves. A lot of things, if they're in odd shapes, would be hard to stack on the shelves. So if I box it up, the retailer can pack more in there and do it that way. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's why you see cereal in boxes instead of just in bags, because I can stock it up on the shelves better. I want to prevent or at least minimize theft. So that's a lot of times why you see small things in much bigger packages than they would need to be in, because it's easier to, I mean, it makes it harder to slip it in, something like that. If it's food or medication, I know it's all sealed up because I need to prevent tampering. do not consume if the seal is broken, that kind of stuff. I also need to make it convenient and portable for consumers. The easier it is to use, the more likely they're going to buy it, and the more often they're going to buy it. They gave the example in there about the Coke and how it's packaged in the refrigerator, and the aluminum people came up with a new way to package the 6-pack together so that it would fit in the fridge easier and people would drink more. And also, the packaging is another way to communicate that integrated marketing message that we talked about before. Here's another way to speak to the consumers. And that brings us to labels. Again, labels is another way to communicate your marketing message to the consumers. A lot of things have legal requirements here. So the label has to meet legal requirements. If it's food, there's certain information that is required to contain FDA regulations, so it has to have those. Some of them have to have specific warnings on them. Labels also, a lot of time, will give operating instructions or suggested uses. Here's different ways to use our product. A lot of times the label has an awful lot to accomplish in a really small amount of time, which is why you see the increased use of QR codes. So it's hard for me to explain exactly how to use this product, but since most people have their smartphone out at the store anyway, I click on this, I can go to a website, I can watch a little video and see how it works, and that makes it a lot easier to communicate to the customer. And then the last section in here is some ethical issues in brand management. And we talk in here about infringement, like copyright infringement. And if you've spent all this effort to build up a brand, you don't want people infringing on that, coming up with a name that's really, really close to yours, so they get to benefit from all this work that you did to build this this customer loyalty and this brand loyalty. Sometimes you're so successful at building it that you actually can lose the rights, and it becomes a generic term. For instance, zipper. Zipper was a brand name, but now everybody just uses the word zipper regardless of who made it, or styrofoam. And so you became such a household name for that. Frisbee is another one. And so sometimes you see it on TV and they say plastic flying disc instead of Frisbee, because Frisbee is still copyrighted. But because it's so strongly identified with that product, even though there are other manufacturers of it, people still call that. The other thing you see is cyber squatting, which is a new one, and that's going out and grabbing a domain name on the internet, a website, so that people think they're going to one thing and they end up going to another, and there's nothing there. So the laws are still developing to kind of identify that type of thing. So that's a summary of Chapter 2, and let me know if you have any questions.